Hello, everyone, and welcome to our fourth UCEA Presidential Lecture Series. I'm thrilled to be co-hosting today's event with Karen Stansberry Beard, who is our current UCEA president. And I'm thrilled at the people that she's invited to come talk to us today about some of the really important questions and issues and research and practices around positive psychology and the work that and the implications of that for leadership preparation. I'm sort of dialing in from Michigan State University. We have a lovely sunny Wednesday afternoon, which is a perfect setting. I'm very much in my positive space and ready to hear and learn from all of our amazing panelists. With that, Karen, I will pass it on to you to get us started.
Okay, thank you very much and welcome everyone. We really very much appreciate the time that you've taken to join us as we talk to you about our work. It has been wonderful getting to meet these researchers and to share our works with one another. In this particular intersection, it seems at times very, very lonely because it's a unique pulling. As a field, though, in education administration, we've always pulled from other areas. We've pulled from law, we've pulled from business management and medicine and other aspects of psychology, but positive psychology is relatively new. Now, as a practice, I can't say it's new because it really dates back to Aristotle, really in thinking about well-being and those very positive aspects of living a good life. So it's not new in that sense. It's new that it was coined positive psychology, and then later, and I shouldn't say later as it moved into education, but also the aspects of positive education. So what does this mean for us as leaders, and how are we leading buildings and families and communities in ways that are not just positive, but preventative of some of the deficit mindedness that is so much associated with education. And that's sort of how I landed in this space. And I'll just give you a little bit of my background. And many of you have heard this before. I've shared some of this when I've spoken before, so this isn't new. But as I was learning here, actually at Ohio State, getting my PhD, I had the benefit of really being in the presence of some professors who really downloaded a lot of very good information. And I was exposed not only to the traditional education administration studies that most of us in educational leadership or education administration are exposed to, but I also was exposed to works by Claude Steele, John Ogbu, Gloria Ladson-Billings, the Dahl studies by the Clarks. Jenny Oakes' work on tracking really got a hold of me, and I'll share a little bit more about that. My oldest son, was at a school at the time that I was actually going through my program, and he was being tracked out of AP US history. And I couldn't wrap my head around it. I couldn't make sense of it. And like many mothers, you're advocating for your child from the outside, but I had the double whammy of having to have been an administrator in Central Ohio. So I had to be very careful about my advocacy for my own child, but it didn't stop me from advocating for him. And that's when Jenny Oakes' work came into my life. Jenny Oakes' work came into my life where she put words to what I was experiencing in the tracking space. And I really went into this, for lack of a better word, I can't say depression, but I was angry. I was really angry, and I was in the middle of my studies. And my major professor at the time kind of pushed and was like, you know what, you got to get over this. You got to keep going, or you're not going to get done. And he was the one who handed me the work on positive psychology. And it was a book on flow that I was reading. He was also doing some positive psychology work on academic optimism. We're not going to do too much with that today, but I'm just going to put that out there so you know. Academic optimism is another construct of positive psychology, or that folds into the arena of positive psychology, and one that I teach here at OSU. Here at OSU, I developed a course called Positive Psychology in Education Administration. So I really wanted to take the work and the things that I learned and give them to upcoming administrators, so that gave them a space to take their minds away from deficit thinking about practices or students who were performing in ways that they had preconceived notions and ideas, and help them embed different ideas about why that might be so. Could it be context? Could it be other things that, could it be well-being? Could it be other things that they need to piece out and parcel out in their leadership, so that we're bringing more students to opportunities, to higher opportunities, but also excellence in education. And that's where my heart lies and my heart exists. So Csikszentmihalyi's book on flow was the first one that I was introduced to. I was not introduced to positive psychology as a field. I was not introduced to Marty Seligman. I was introduced to Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi's work on flow. And one thing he said in the first book I read, which was a publication that came out, I want to say in 1997, he said the two institutions that needed positive psychology and especially flow were schools and where homes, excuse me, were schools where most people spend most of the time of the day. School and work. I'm sorry, I said that backwards. School and work where most people spend most of the time of the day. That's where he said those institutions need positive psychology. So I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm running schools. Let me read what this is about. And then I followed up in that transition to Seligman's work, where he and Csikszentmihalyi had written a paper for the American Psychological Association. I want to say around 2000. Don't quote me on that. I might not be completely right on that. But Seligman and Csikszentmihalyi said, families, schools, religious communities, and corporations need to develop communities that foster strengths instead of focusing on fixing illnesses. Now, that's not to say that there's not a need to fix illnesses, but they're saying intervention and prevention begins with fostering strength. And that just gave me a place to go. So much of the literature around education, especially education of students who are traditionally marginalized, has come from a deficit perspective. This gave me a landing space to kind of take my head away from that and really focus on what this positive psychology had to offer. And what it has to offer is what works, and focusing on those things that work and seeing if you can not only transplant them and recreate them in other contexts, but also then to make sure that what works is working for a wider array of people. So for me, it was more preventative. It was a much more intervention way to think about how to lead so that you're offsetting problems instead of spending your entire day putting fires out and fixing problems. So that became very appealing to me and very, very, appealing. And then Csikszentmihalyi wrote one more thing. And then I'm going to stop talking about Csikszentmihalyi. You'll get to this. I'll get to the flow in a minute. But he said, wherever there is a need for improvement in life, all of it, flow could lead the way. And I was shocked. I thought it was a rather arrogant statement to make, like, oh, this man thinks his theory can fix the world. Like everything really is flow. And to make a long story short, I finished my dissertation. We got my first position at Miami University of Ohio, and was sharing some of my research. And one of the persons said to me, you should talk to Miami University of Ohio is a much smaller institution than the one I'm in now. So let me just contextualize that. But you should talk to the dean, who's a door away, and the provost, and see about research funding, and go get your questions answered. So I called Csikszentmihalyi and I said, I have a problem that I'm wrestling with, and I really would like to talk to you about it. And his response was, when can you come? Now, I was a little shocked because I didn't expect to be invited to the space, but I did go. And my question was the one that we've all been sitting in education on for so very long, which is why are our children not succeeding at the same rate and in the same ways? And these same subgroups are continually at the bottom, so to speak, of what is traditionally known as educational advancement. And I knew it was a heavy question, and I knew I was going to try to see what he was going to say about that. And he answered my question. And I walked away from that conversation thinking, I know I'm in ed admin, I know I lead buildings, I know I'm moving into the superintendency, but this positive psychology thing has got a hold on me. And it had a hold on me in a different way, very much like the tracking work that Jeannie was doing had a hold on me. I just was influenced by some really interesting minds and perspectives early. I didn't know how they were all going to come together. And candidly, it took me a very long time to figure out how they were all coming together, but they did. And so that was my foray into positive psychology. You want to go ahead and take the next slide, Monica, and I'll talk a little bit about flow theory. So flow,
I
oh,
mean, I was gonna say, Karen, because we have everyone here now. If we want
you
to,
want to, well, I kind of teed it up. Well, that's okay. Yeah, I do want to wait. Let's let the practitioners go first because I
perfect.
do think it's important that the folks who came for that portion get to hear that.
Mhm.
All right, so Adam Clark is here. He is the current superintendent at Mount Diablo, USD, California. He's also the president of the African American Superintendent Association in California. Pamela Maddox is the principal of Compton Early College High School in Willowbrook and Willowbrook Middle School in California. And Katie Connor is a PhD student in social linguistics here at The Ohio State University. Don't flip it yet. I just want to talk for a second.
Mhm.
So Adam and Pamela were actually on my first panel at UCEA in November, but didn't really get an opportunity to share some of the really good things that they were doing and had seen and done in both their districts and schools. I wanted to invite them back and give them this opportunity. So I'm really glad they said yes, and they're here. I will also say in this work, this positive psychology work that I kind of unfolded for you, California's been in the lead for quite some time. They really have a good sense around well-being. In fact, I went into 2 different districts while I was there, and both of them were focusing on the well-being of children before well-being was really kind of a catchphrase that we've latched on to. The whole child came out of that work and thinking about educating around barriers, around academic barriers where you are treating students. And one of the districts I was in, the board said, we learned early on that a healthy child is a child who's ready to learn. So our first job was making sure that the children that we were bringing into our space were healthy. And so that's not an academic issue, but it's certainly an issue that addresses some of the challenges we have in academics. So California, nod to you. And I always go to these to the folks in California when I'm looking, because I know that they've been in the work for a long time and they can talk about some really wonderful things. And Katie Connor is one of our students. I learned about Katie. I was actually doing an evaluation of one of our central office administrators, and Katie is one of the student governance workers. And she was talking about some of the things that they did, not only during COVID, that worked well to sustain student populations, but also then after when we had some of the unrest on campus around different religious groups. And then now, even now, I should say, as our immigrant population seems to be under siege. So I wanted Katie just to come in and talk about some of the things she did from a student's perspective, student governance perspective, because we do have in UCEA now a growing number of graduate students. So I wanted to give a little bit of a voice to practitioners and graduate students before we land in the research that our organization is primarily about. So Adam, if you're there we go.
Yep, I'm here. It's
Yay,
so
welcome.
good to see you again,
Good to be here and good to see you
and
too.
yeah, and thank you. And I enjoyed listening to you over the last couple minutes. So yeah, my name is Dr. Adam Clark, superintendent of the Mount Diablo Unified School District in the San Francisco Bay Area. We are about 30 miles east of San Francisco, and I lead a very diverse district. We have 55 schools, and we cover 7 different cities, and within those cities, we have extreme wealth and also students who come from extreme poverty and need and everything in between. And so I'm really fortunate to be here. And I really like the research that you were sharing before, just about positivity and about just being positive about this work. So I just want to preface that I come into this work each and every day, and of course I face, many challenges and obstacles, but I think that I am extremely fortunate to be able to be in a position where we get to shape young lives. And so what I'm going to just share with you over the next couple slides, this was from our last board meeting, and this is how I start every single meeting that I lead within my district. Can I have the next slide, please? So in California, we do an interesting thing with our funding, is we used to get our funding in many different buckets. And then they put it all in one bucket, and it's called the local control and accountability plan. Um, but part of that plan is you have to develop goals with your community, with your with the board, with your staff, with students, with community members, and we all give input on what we would like to see within our district. And so what I'm just going to kind of go over is our LCAP goals. And the reason why I want to talk about this is because this is what I base all of our work in. School districts are extremely complex. Again, I talked about the diversity of our student body. We have a diversity of students who come in with the diversity of skills and different levels and things of that nature. So we really try to center ourselves in these goals. And so, I'm not going to go over every goal and every word, but I just really want to touch on goal one, which is all students will receive a high quality education in a safe and welcoming environment. Now, let me just stop there for a minute. Again, all means all. And so, as you talked about marginalized groups and students who continually, regardless of what data we're pulling, we have students from particular student groups that always tend to fall into categories that are predictable. And so when we talk about all students receiving high quality, that means every school. That doesn't just mean our schools in our extremely wealthy areas where academics is off the charts. It means every classroom. And we have excellence throughout our district. But what I really strive for is that it's systemic. It's not just this dynamic teacher or this dynamic principal or this dynamic group of teachers. It's everyone, because I believe as parents send us their best and brightest, that they should have the opportunity, not playing like roulette and hoping that their child falls into an environment where she or him are going to be supported or whatnot, but that regardless of where they are placed, they're going to do well. So that piece of safe and welcoming. And you brought up earlier about the about immigrants. And so earlier this year, I appeared, and I didn't know I was going to be on the front page, but I appeared on the front page of the New York Times around would I protect our students if ICE came to our school to interview students or to get students? And I just said, well, it's in our mission to create a safe environment. And safe, definitely, if you've ever tried to go to a school and pick up a child, if you aren't on that emergency form, you have no chance of getting that kid. And so we have systems and procedures in place that if outside agencies come to speak to a child, they have to go through a litany of processes and procedures in order for that to happen. And so when I was posed with that question, I just went back to what our goals are. So the next part of that is with high expectations and rigorous instruction. So again, if you have a school that has a high percentage of new teachers, right, who maybe haven't gone through the training or maybe aren't fully credentialed, like, can we really ensure that students under their care are going to receive that rigorous instruction? So we really focus on instruction. And we do it in a positive way. We don't take a punitive approach to this, right? As we're educating kids, I mean, you hit it on the head earlier. Our kids have to be well, right? They have to be fed. They have to feel safe. They have to know that the people who are caring for them, have their best interests in mind and things like that. So just going to this first goal really helps me lead this very diverse and very large organization. And then the last thing I'll say about this goal is that um, is that our instruction is based in the California state standards. So it's making sure that our students are not just getting, work that a teacher found on a website or found on the internet somewhere or something like at the base, they're going to get grade level standards, and that is an expectation that we take extremely serious. And then we want to make sure that all of our students are prepared for college and career. We got to put career in there. Of course, I would like all of our students to go to college. I mean, that is really, why I'm in this work, is to make sure that our students are educated, and education is something that can never be taken for them. And I want them to, to embrace this and to go forward. But also, careers are also everything, right? Everything is steeped in careers, and I just want our students to be able to do that. And so I am fortunate to be able to show up each and every day and do this work. And then goal two just really focuses on our instructors, making sure that our instructors and all staff understand the different cultures and different communities that our students come from. And then number three is really that partnership with our families and communities. So often as school districts or schools or classrooms, we just kind of talk at parents. And I really want to create opportunities for our parents to be involved and to pull them into the system. But you have to do that kind of with this joy and excitement about learning and about, the education process. Can I have the next slide? And then lastly, and these are just our last two goals, is that we have to be intentional. Our data tells us, and we also get strict direction from our state. If we have students who are student groups who are continually underperforming, then we have to call it out, and we have to be very intentional on how we're working to meet their needs. So we have a program called our Focal Scholar Program, and so we're targeting African American students, foster youth, students experiencing homelessness, students from our special education populations, just students who learn differently, right? If you have an IEP, you access the curriculum differently than maybe other students do, and so we recognize that. And then of course our multilingual students, and so with those groups, we just want to be intentional with reviewing their data, making sure that our teachers and our principals and district office staff understand what the data is saying, and we want to do things that are impacting the data in a positive way, and we want to stop doing things that are not having that impact. And then in goal five, Crossroads is a high school that we have for teenage mothers, and so we noticed that their attendance rates are really fluctuate. And again, if you aren't in school, then you can't access the curriculum or the experiences. So we call that out. Olympic High School is one of our continuation schools, and again, continuation schools, students are very transient. So we just want to make sure that we are getting those students to school, that we're engaging with their families and those students, because we want them to be able to earn enough credits to graduate and be able to pursue college and career. And then this last slide, if I can go to the next one. This is everything I just said, but it's a visual of it. And we have a strong partnership in our district with the California Collaborative for Educational Excellence, and they are a state-supported organization that assists districts that have student groups that are underperforming for multiple years. And so they help us with professional development, and they're really like our academic North Star. But I share all this just because we have such a great opportunity in public education to impact so many different students. But the way you do that is that you have to make sure that students have their needs met, that they feel welcome, that they feel part of a community, that the adults around them see those students individually for who they are, but they do understand where they come from and their cultures, and we accept that. We don't try to mold those students into our culture. We're really there to make sure that our system is meeting their needs. And how do we do that if we don't really understand where they're coming from? And then, of course, um, that social emotional piece is something that we invest a lot of time and effort into. We have wellness centers at our high schools and most of our junior high schools. They're staffed by social work specialists. We work on a lot of the mental health aspects of our students and making sure that they are making sure that they're in a good place. And then lastly, just really is that educational equity, which just means simply giving students what they need so that they can access college and career. And so, we do this work, with excitement, with as I'm working with teachers and I'm working with principals. Yes, we're in May right now, and like everything is just coming down on us right now.
On
But just
fire.
there's always a smile on my face, and as I lead, I just try to be really intentional and very clear with what our expectations are, so people don't have to guess or don't have to be under that anxiety and stress of what their purpose is in doing this work. So I'll stop there, and unless I got more time, I can go on forever. But I just wanted to give you just a snapshot, and those goals are something that I want to make sure that as we're leading classrooms and schools, that we don't have to go to the shelf to get our goals and mission on how we work with students with special needs, or how we work with our multilingual population, or our Latino population, or our Caucasian population. I just want a goal that meets the needs of all students, and that's how I try to simplify and make this work accessible to all.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. And we will re-engage you in just a
Yeah,
little bit.
absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you. Pamela, as I mentioned to you, Pamela is the head principal of Compton Early College High School and to Willowbrook Middle School. So she's seeing students who come from communities that we used to think of as very challenging, but a lot of the work that has been done in that turnaround has improved that entire area. And if you go, you're going to be very impressed with what you see. And Pamela's hand has been in that. And not only is she working with the students at the high school, but students down in the middle school level as well. Pamela?
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Well, it's afternoon here, evening somewhere else. Dr. Clark and I, we're still in our afternoon. So,
Yeah.
but hello,
I was
everyone.
afraid to bring you on that school would be letting out, and that's the time when everything jumps off. But
Yes, it is what it is. I mean, it's never a dull moment, but there's no time like the present to talk about who we are, what we do, and why we do what we do. Compton Early College is a span school. We have uh, a school that has two schools on one campus. So the students are here from 6 to 12, and I shouldn't say there. Some of them elect to stay here for high school, and some of them move on to other high schools. It's just their choice. We are a school of choice, but we also are a dual enrollment program. So we're a unique school all around. We love to talk about the students and what they do and how and their success stories. And we are a school that prides itself in student support. We're going to talk more about that, but you can turn the slide to the next slide, please. So we are a dual enrollment school. I want to talk about that because it really is, just amazing, the accomplishments of these students. So our students, we do have 100% graduation rate. And let me say that our school only began 10 years ago. So we have only had a few graduating classes. We started out with the ninth grade and we have built it up. But for the since 2019, every single graduating class, every student has graduated. We haven't left not one student behind. All students have been accepted to college, whether they attend or not. It's their choice, but it is our goal and our commitment to their families that we will ensure that your student is accepted to a four-year university. And so that's what we have done. And not to my surprise, but maybe to some, 92% of our students have 3.0 or higher GPA. And this is really going to floor you. About 81% of them graduate with not just their high school diploma, but with their AA degree as well.
Love it.
And so, and 60% of them have count them, 2 degrees. So they have their high school diploma and 2 degrees, college degrees, by the time they graduate from high school. So the data speaks for itself. And a lot of that just comes from, true dedication. Oh, let me go back. 10% of them have triple majors. Some of them do have 3 degrees. So, okay, they're amazing. They're absolutely amazing. And 60% of them graduate from Compton College with honors. And so the students put in the work. We are here to support them, to guide them into their futures. And that is something we take very, very seriously. But I want to, pay homage to our district. My superintendent is amazing, absolutely amazing. He supports our school. He supports not just my school, but all of the other comprehensive schools as well. He will stop at nothing to make sure that the students achieve what they set out to, because we, along with myself and him and the board, have made commitments to these parents that if you come here, this is what we can do for your students. We will do it. Next slide, please. So how do we do that? Support. You have to be supportive of your students. You can't just leave them here and say, okay, do what you need to do. You have to look at the data, see how they're performing, support them in their performance. You have to lead with a student-centered approach, thinking about what they do. I go into the classrooms all the time. That's where I spend my day, in the classrooms, talking to the kids. I just sneak in there, creep in there. I wear soft shoes. And so I sneak up behind and say, hey, so what you doing? How's it going? How's the lesson going? Do you understand? Because they have to be able to trust me and feel inclusive, like they're a part of the school, they're a part of this room. But on top of that, I have to provide my staff with the support that they need in order to accomplish the massive goals that these students have set for themselves. But more importantly, we make sure that everyone feels included. The school culture is welcoming, and they feel like when they walk through those gates every day, it feels like home. This is where I'm supposed to be. Next slide, please.
Love it.
The other support that we have is the counselor support. The counselors, they really are the gateway. They are the people that are on the front lines. They have to know what's going on with the students. We have a 4-year plan. When the students come in, we make sure that they have a plan and they know their plan, but we support them all along the way. I can't say enough about support, support, support. We have to check in regularly. We can't just say, oh, here you are in the beginning and go ahead and go through. But no, we check with them twice. And I ask my counselors to meet with their students twice a year. Every single student. It's a monumental feat, but it's necessary. We have to accomplish that. Next slide, please. Teachers, because the administration, the counselors must support our teachers, because I expect for my teachers to deliver high quality instruction. We don't believe in being average, mediocre. What we do believe in is building strong relationships with these students, so they'll know that the high expectations that we have for them is because we believe in them. You got to believe in them. You got to believe in the kids. If you don't believe in, if they feel like you don't believe in them, they're going to behave like that. That's the outcome that you're going to see. I believe in student excellence and teacher excellence. When I walk in the room, I want to know that the teacher is up and about and connecting with the students, promoting collaboration, and most importantly, knowing what's happening in the class, knowing that the students still feel supported no matter what's happening. Next slide, please. Academic support. So many times, the students are in these, and it's AP testing going on right now. They have all of these AP courses and they're taking all of these classes, but are they being supported? How are they being supported after we sign them up for these college level classes, college level, not just here in APs, but also at the college level themselves? Who's supporting those students? So we make it a point for our teachers to do check-ins with the college classes that they have, and also the AP classes. We have tutors that support them. We have student support specialist that checks in with them all the time. So we make sure they have the technology that they need. If they feel like they are not being as successful as they thought they could be, then we just go back and have a talk with them and ask them what's going on. You got to talk. You have to collaborate. We have flexible scheduling to accommodate the classes that they need. We don't want to overwhelm them, but we do want them to be well-rounded. We want them to be student athletes, scholar athletes. We want them to be a part of clubs. We want them to have the whole experience, not just have classes on top of classes on top of classes. And more importantly, I love celebrating our students. And we can't just make them work, and not celebrate their small accomplishments. We recognize them for the big ones, but the small accomplishments are so important that we celebrate. You know, every morning, you know, I try and find something to say about someone personal that I say, oh, I heard on the way in, you know, oh, it's somebody's birthday, or I heard that, oh, somebody received this scholarship. And so I just want them to know, I hear you, I see you, we are a part of you. Next slide, please. But the one thing that is the most important thing is family engagement. You have to include the family. They have to know that we are here for you, not just here for your students, but you are a part of who we are. We have an open door policy so that students and their families can come in because what happens at the end of the day, what is the benefits of it? Higher academic achievement,
Right.
better social emotional development for the students. It definitely builds trust for them with each other and with us. We are a school community that feels like we're not just a community, but we're a family. And we cannot have barriers to student success. But the barrier is not including the families.
That's
That's
right.
the largest barrier. You have to include them. These are their children. I always talk about there's somebody else's children. So we have to treat them well. We have to know that they are the reason why we exist. None of us would exist without these children. And so we have to treat them well. And I like Dr. Clark. I could keep going, you know, I could just keep talking about the kids, but the kids, and sometimes people ask, well, how do you all do it? You know, how do you accomplish so much? I said, it's the students. They put in the work. They have done all of this. We were the force behind them, just supporting them all the way, all the way. So I don't know if do I have another slide? And that might be.
And the work that you put in, Pamela, is really nothing less than spectacular. I was just so impressed, so very impressed when I had the chance to visit. So thank you so very much. We are gonna come back, as I said before, if time allows. And I was very intentional about this panel because UCEA is so representative of so many different aspects. So I wanted to again make sure we had our superintendent, principal practitioner voices here. But then also Katie is coming to us from a graduate student leadership perspective. And I'd like Katie to talk to you about some of the positive practices that she embarked on right here at Ohio State University. She's ours, so don't get any thoughts. She's ours. Katie?
Yeah, thank you so much. Yes, only a Buckeye for a little longer, hopefully dissertating and getting out of here soon
Yep.
at some point. But yeah, so my name's Katie. I use pronoun she, hers. So I've been a member of the Council of Graduate Students for 7 years. I've been in it since I got here to OSU. In that time, I've been a delegate for my own department. I've been a committee chair for 2 different committees, and I'm finishing up my 3rd term as the vice president. And in that role, I've really taken on the internal operations of our organization, really working with all of our membership who help to represent the 11,000 graduate students here at OSU. And really help to build up and rebuild, especially in a post-COVID world, the infrastructure that we use to mentor and support and develop our membership so that they can go out and represent like themselves and their graduate colleagues. One of the first things that we've really emphasized in the last couple of years in CGS is this role of community care, and not just telling people that we care, but really showing up and showing them that we do. We've really found that in an age where administrators in some cases can make promises that aren't kept, or department chairs are being inaccessible, that we want to not only tell our colleagues and our constituents that we're here and we're doing things and things like that, but actually showing up and like demonstrating that commitment to our fellow graduate students and to their betterment as graduate students in all facets of their lives. Um, Post-COVID, we noticed that there was a really high rate of burnout among graduate students. You know, there was lower pay, there was more service opportunities that people were being pushed to do. And so one of the things we did was found a membership wellness committee within CGS to actually help look internally and reflect a little bit at how we were supporting our members or not supporting them and where could be doing better. So we've started doing things like monthly shout outs and honoring people's birthdays. We've started doing things like meal trains when people are sick or when people have an emergency. You know, we make sure that we have little cards around, and the president and I, if we see somebody is doing something or we hear, hey, they did this great thing for their department, we write a note, we hand them a Starbucks gift card, we say, hey, get a coffee on us, thank you for that work. So we really try to make sure that both in big ways through events and programming and public statements, but also in these really little ways that we're showing up for each other. You know, we really want to make sure that every choice we make whispers that we care and that they belong here. Next slide, please. One of the other things that we do, and I've really been kind of the harbinger of, is getting curious and not furious, especially for our membership. You know, life is hard as a graduate student. Things can be incredibly isolating. You know, doing your PhD or master's thesis or your practicum can be really, really isolating and hard. And so one of the things that we've done is when people have fallen short of expectations, or maybe they're engaging in ways that are counter to the ethics and values that we hold as an organization, we try to reach out and check in and see what's going on and kind of diagnose the problem before we start, you know, kind of laying blame or getting aggressive or saying like, hey, you can't do that. You know, sometimes it's that somebody's parent has passed away. Sometimes it's, hey, you've got a sick child. Sometimes it's, hey, I'm about to do candidacy, I'm really stressed, or I've got 3 conferences next week. We really want to make sure that we are being cognizant of all of these different issues that can come and face a graduate student and address the need that's not being met, and then working to figure out how we can make sure that we're kind of rising back up to the level of the membership that we would like to see. And we've really found that both through this membership wellness committee, as well as kind of using this curiosity engagement, we've not only cut down on a lot of the interpersonal kind of stress and tension that was happening when people were miscommunicating and then holding these grudges, but we've also been able to help people get better supports, whether it's, again, making sure that people aren't food insecure, making sure that they can find extra jobs, making sure that they're taking time and taking care, being referred to our counseling services, things like that. Next slide, please. Another thing that we've really emphasized is the value of servant leadership, and again, showing up. So really making sure that CGS leadership has shown that we're not just going to task our committee chairs or members with doing things, but that we're willing to show up and do these things ourselves. So when there is an event, you know, I helped haul boxes across campus for Graduate Student Appreciation Week. I'm not just going to tell you to do the thing. If you need help, I will show up and do it. You know, we give rides across campus to make sure that posters can be dropped off. If somebody's like, oh my gosh, I left this flash drive here, you run it across to them, you know, making sure that we're doing all these little things to show that no matter how big or how small these tasks are, they all really help to contribute to bettering the graduate student engagement on campus here. We've embraced really intentional team building. You know, we all love like a funny, silly activity, but really trying to make sure that we're actually getting things out of them and not just doing things that kind of leave people rolling their eyes and saying like, that was a waste of 20 minutes. You know, so making sure that we're really getting lessons and doing some professional development while we are building those bonds with each other, having a laugh, kind of blowing off steam together. We've really intentionally rebuilt our delegate orientation every year so they not only understand the history and context of CGS, but we can do some skill building like, hey, maybe you haven't emailed your department chair or a dean before. Here's how you can do that. Maybe you're a little shy. Here's how we can meet and greet people in our department and be a little bit more open to things like that. Next slide. One of the other things we've really embraced in a post-COVID era is seeking feedback and following up on it. We have really tried to, not only within ourselves through World Cafes, to kind of talk to our membership about what we're doing, how we can do it better, but also getting graduate students in a room, getting administrators in a room, getting faculty in a room, getting CGS in a room together to say, hey, what's going on with funding? Or, hey, what, you know, needs aren't being met, things like that. You know, making sure we're reaching out and temperature gauging constantly so that we know what people need and we know how to rise to meet those needs or meet those concerns or answer the questions that they may have. Next slide, please. So finishing up, the biggest takeaway that I would offer here is consistency is absolutely the key of everything we do. CGS actually next year is going to be our 70th year. In those 70 years, the number one thing that we have done is show up for our people. We make sure that we're not just here listening and advocating on their behalf when they're concerned about their visas being revoked. We were one of the first people on the ground on that here at OSU, making sure that people have food, making sure that people are being listened to in their departments. We want to make sure that we are resilient, that we have a community, that people know that they can trust us, they can come to us. We know that a 7th-year grad student or a 1st-year grad student, if they're like, well, who do I go to? Somebody will say, oh, CGS, that's who you go to. So we really want to be somebody that people can reliably turn to and trust and know that we're going to show up for them. So really, truly, if there's nothing else to take away, it really is building a plan and intentionally being there every single step of the way for your people at every single level. So yeah, thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it.
Love it. Thank you. Thank you, Katie. A couple of other things that she didn't go into, but I took away also the signs that were on the yard all around. Tell me a little bit about that. Those were really good. I've done that.
Yeah, I was about to say Buckeye Love Week is really incredible. So that's done through the Office of Student Life, which we are a part of, and a number of different groups kind of work together on it. I want to give Tracy Stuck, if any of you know her or don't know her, a shout out because that was really one of her babies. It's got little just like messages across campus. They get put out. We actually also create some yard signs that can go out into the community in the university area district, and some of them say just really basic things like "You matter" or "We're glad you're here." And then other things, sometimes there's quotes from people talking about community and care and love. It really is a way to show up for people. Another thing they do during that week is actually people can submit kudos for other people, and they will actually take like a little, like it's like a 4-wheeler mini sized campus cart, and they go drop off treats and notes to people that say, hey, somebody noticed that you've been kind to someone this week, or thank you for being a great advisor, and things like that. And so again, it's this idea of on a campus of 150,000 plus faculty, staff, students, community members, how do you make sure that every single person knows that they're being seen and has a constant reminder that they really do belong here and that they would be missed and they aren't just being swallowed up on what is a really large campus if you've never been here.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Katie. Appreciate it. And so those are our practitioner voices that you got the opportunity to hear from, just some of the things that they are doing to push the dial, push the needle, I guess I want to say, towards excellence in education, but also really focusing on community well-being and by focusing on individual well-being. Really appreciate the three of you joining us, and I'll be back with more questions in just a few. And so now, as UCEA continues to be a research-heavy institution and organization, we're going to dabble into a little bit of the research. I gave you a good bit of the beginning of my introduction, so I'm not going to go back to that. I'm just going to start talking to you a little bit about flow. As I mentioned to you, that was the first one. And just this year, and I will say, is this the 15th year? So it's almost full circle. As I was talking about education administration and thinking about positive psychology, it was just this year that I was able to get my article, Flow Under Threat, published. And so this is one that I'm very proud of. It's like a baby you've been holding for 15 years, trying to figure out what it's going to become. And here she is. So I will talk a little bit about flow and the evolution of my thinking in that work. And then we'll move on to some of the work around PERMA. And I believe Sabrina is going to talk to us a little bit about resilience and possibly some about mindfulness. So those are the areas that we're going to try to cover. There are so many positive psychology constructs, but these are the two that I have found that have been the most that resonate the most in schools and in learning are flow and PERMA, I think, but not that mindset or resilience doesn't apply to teachers and the work that they do. It does, as well as students. But I want to start with flow and then pass it off for PERMA, although studies on all of these have been done by almost all of us. So thank you. So flow is considered a theory of engagement and enjoyment. Now I know you really can't see that, Monica. I don't know if you can pull that out. Flow, I'm sorry, it won't open up. But flow is made up of 9 different tenets. The first one of which, and this is important, is goal, skill, match. So in flow, it's not just that the goal has to match the skill level of the individual. It actually has to be slightly higher so that there is a focus, there is an intentional concentration on meeting that goal through an acquired skill. The rest of those, I'm sorry you can't read them, but they're not as important as when I talk to you about the actual model. So I just want to talk to you about that. 9 different pieces to the flow construct, 9 different tenets to the flow construct. And PERMA is the theory, considered the theory of well-being in positive psychology. And there are 5. Now, the H was added a little bit later. The first were the positive emotions. The second is engagement, which Seligman goes back to flow and says that flow really is the engagement aspect of PERMA. So there's positive emotions. I keep tripping on that. Positive emotions, engagement, positive relationships, and then moving into, and I'm sorry, I wish I could open that up better. Not just the meaning, but life purpose, like how you think about yourself and the way you make sense of yourself in the world, how you bring meaning into the world. And then accomplishment. And then, of course, the last one that was added on was health. And the reason health became an add-on was because people said, you could have all of these other things. You could have great relationships. You could have purpose in your life. But if you don't have good health, then you really don't have a strong sense of well-being. So it was that the health aspect of that was added on after the PERMA on that. So if you could move on to the next one for me, Monica. All right, so flow, this is the channel, and I know I can't show it to you, but that channel in the center is what's called the flow state. Anything or anytime someone has a challenge level that is higher than their skill level, they move into the space of anxiety. That's that top left corner. And when you're in that place of anxiety, it's very hard to concentrate, very hard to focus. So that is a non-productive state. If your skill level is higher than the challenge, you move into that lower right quadrant, and that's the quadrant of boredom. And that's where we find a lot of students who are not challenged, not engaged, because their skill level exceeds the actual challenge that's been in front of them. The sweet spot is that flow channel in the middle, where there is fun, excitement about the activity, you become energized about what you're learning, your focus point is there, and it ultimately ends up in growth. So I just wanted to show that to you, the anxiety, what the flow channel looks like, and that's Csikszentmihalyi's flow channel. And this is what Quinn said. All right, so flow is made up these 9 constructs. The first one I showed you was all 9 of them hanging together into one construct. And that was the original way that flow was thought of and conceptualized. And also the measure was designed of flow state off of that model. But then Ryan Quinn came along and he said, that's all well and good for athletes and for artists because flow might come in that way. But for people who do mind work and intelligence work, it doesn't happen like that. You have to have certain conditions set up in order for people to enter into that flow state. And those conditions, he said, were these 3 here. You have to have that challenge skill balance we know about, but there also has to be clear goals. People need to clearly know what it is that you want them to accomplish so that they can engage with clarity and then get direct feedback. That's what feeds concentration. So this model became not just a model for me of engagement, but it also became a learning model. So when I'm thinking about students in school, and the many times they're brought to me in the office, sent to my office, and a teacher is saying they're not concentrating. And I'm thinking, or they can't concentrate. That was the one that really blew me because I'm thinking this child has the abilities of everyone else, and you're saying that they can't concentrate. Let's think about what it is that we're asking them to do and what's blocking that concentration. So this model became very instructive for me. And even as I teach this, and I know many of the students that I teach now may or may not go into the principalship or the superintendency, but I want to make them stronger teachers in the process. So I always introduce this model as we go through. So these are the 9, actually 11 aspects of flow. He expanded it. And it goes from not only goal clarity, but then feedback clarity. And then Quinn called flow, really, it's just the merging of awareness and application together. And that gives people a greater sense of control, which they enjoy, an autototelic experience, that feeling of that high that you get, like a runner's high when you're really all cylinders are going and you're feeling really good about the work. You lose self-consciousness. That means that you're not worried about the things that are entering into your mind about how well you're performing. And then you have this transformation of time. So if you've ever had a runner's high, or if you've had a situation where you've been in and you're performing super, super well, you have this occurrence of a transformation of time. Either time slows down and you can feel every moment of what is going on, but then it also speeds up. When you look up at the clock and you realize, man, I've been working on this for 4 hours and didn't realize, how much time I've been dedicated to that. That's that deep engagement, deep concentration that leads to deeper learning. Monica? So in my work and in this study, I really wanted to find out, how is this available to students who are marginalized? So I conducted a study, and from the study, these are the things that I found that people were used to navigate situations when they were challenged, when their flow capacity was challenged. So one of the antecedents of flow then had to be creating conducive climate, a climate that had very little or no threat, that they could feel free to authentically engage, but they also felt that the environment, very much like Pamela was saying, there was authentic care, that people cared about you being there. Katie and Pamela spoke to that a little bit. The empathy and understanding of knowing what it is like to be marginalized and trying to offset some of that. And then the support that we heard again from Pamela over and over again, making sure that that environment is supportive so that people have some situational awareness and that they are willing, as Katie said, to step up and be present and be there to support. Moni? So this is what the flow under threat model looks like. It engaged, yes, the challenge, skill, balance, and the goal clarity, but the third one on that now is a climate that's conducive for learning. And that is a climate that has all of those other aspects I shared with you in the first slide. So this is a reimagined or a racially addressing of flow theory. And Ellen and I had a long conversation, and I'm sorry, it wasn't Ellen, it was, Ellen and I had a long conversation about the beginning of positive psychology, and it really does come from a very European, Western perspective. And so thinking about this in the same way that I'm thinking about bringing more marginalized students to the table, it was very important for me to tease out this model that Csikszentmihalyi told me, right, could lead to a better quality of life. And in fact, it does create conditions for deeper learning. And I happen to believe, as an educator, as many of you do, a strong education is what leads to a better quality of life. Thank you. Moni? I'd like to introduce to you the other researchers before they take the slides over. Ellen Reams is a professor of educational leadership at Auburn University. She will be next. Sabra Jerkowski is the professor in the Okanagan School of Education, UBC, Okanagan Tier 1 Principals Research Chair in Leadership Learning and Wellbeing at the University of British Columbia. So we went international. And Sabrina Fosco-Doyle is an assistant professor in human development at Penn State, and they will bring their research next. Ellen?
Well, thank you very much, but I'm going to say this is a hard hill to follow after the practitioners from K-12. So just to introduce myself a little bit, I was in K-12 education as a teacher and administrator for 30 years before I went into higher education. And one of the things I said to myself, and I've tried to stay true to all these years, was if I do this, I have to, what the research that I do has to benefit K-12 education. So what I have spent a career at Auburn doing is really looking for innovative practices that we could use in our leadership preparation programs. That's one of my goals. So I started out looking at just mentoring. And back in about 2016, I became exposed to a little bit of what Sabrina will probably talk about in mindfulness. And I'm laughing a little bit about what Karen said about California, because the research in schools with mindfulness was coming from California. That's where you saw a lot of it being practiced in the United States. But it was also the well-being aspects was coming from Canada, and it was coming from Australia and New Zealand and Western Europe. So that's kind of how things really got started with me. That's the background. So it's been almost 10 years since I've been really looking at all of this. This quote from Laura Gale Lunsford. Laura does a lot of work in mentoring, but her specific kind of focus is on program evaluation in mentoring programs. But she's also attached, believe it or not, to positive psychology. That's her background. So if we could go to the next slide. Okay, so this is a model that I've been working on for the past 5 years. We're still testing it. We're still looking at data, and I'll explain to you where some of those data sources are coming from. And I've been doing this work with two of my most wonderful former grad students. They are now in the real world, back in the real world. One is a visiting professor at Auburn. Her name is Angela Adair. And the other one is Rhonda Wheeler, who is the program coordinator for the Alabama New Principal Mentoring Program. And I'm going to show you a little bit about that as well in a minute. So we've based all of our work in positive psychology and trying to show that there really truly is a very important link between mentoring practices and well-being. And we use the PERMA model as our lens. We think that it's, I could put an H on the end. I'm usually using the oldest of the models, of the PERMA models, but it is true that if you don't have good health, the other doesn't really make sense. It doesn't fit. And we're blending that with what I call personal and professional development. That comes from Cram's work in mentoring. So there are people in mentoring. There are few people who write about mentoring being positive psychology and being in that area. You don't see it a lot. So we're trying to foster that idea that good mentoring practices really are all about well-being and positive psychology. The two outer words that you see here, learning partnership and connectedness. I remember, for some of you, this probably isn't important, but when I was going up for a full professor, somebody asked me, and this was back in 2016, you're telling us about this work that you're doing, and what do you think is your next step? And I said, it's social connectedness. And I didn't at the time really know how it was going to fit, but it is so important to this work about mentoring and positive psychology and PERMA. The social connectedness is everything. I look at every relationship that I have with either myself or myself and other people, as well as organizations. I don't care what lens you're looking at. It is a type of learning partnership. So those are the two outer rims of and so far this model's holding up. I just wrote a piece with Angela, and we used the model to describe our relationship, our mentoring relationship, and it was a perfect fit. So we're going to continue to work this model. Next slide. So these are the strands of the current research that I'm working on. The first is the Alabama New Principal Mentoring Program. If you could go to the next slide, and then I'll come back to this. Okay, so these are the states that have mentoring programs for new principals. You can see there are not a lot. The only states that have a 2-year mentoring program, which is what the literature suggests that you have, are here in red. And Alabama 2 years ago put in their through the legislative acts, funded a 2-year new principal mentoring program. And I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. So Monica, if you can go back to the other slide. Yeah. So we've been gathering data statewide, going to conferences, state conferences of school administrators, going to not just conferences, but workshops and regional things, and collecting data now since 2021 on a number of areas: stress, burnout, mentoring, positive psychology, well-being. And it's amazing what these people say. You know, it's like, oh, I take care of the people in my building. This is the principle. I'm taking care of the people in my building, but I don't take care of myself. That is a very real thing. And that's a statement that many of you would recognize is leading to burnout and not being able to continue. So one of the other things we're doing is developing a handbook of PERMA-based structures and processes. And that was on the model that I showed you. And these are occupational setting and personal setting things, tools that we can use to give us the staying power, to be resilient, to continue on. And we're trying to shift, and I'll talk about this with the state mentoring program. We are really trying to shift school administrators' thoughts about taking care of themselves, that they're not being intentional about that, and that they need to be if they intend to try to take care of their followers, and they tend to take care of their organization and its well-being. And then the final thing that we're working on is, well, what can educational leadership preparation programs do? And Angela just finished her research for her dissertation. She's now submitted an article to one of our main journals, JRLE, about what our preparation programs are doing and where they are with knowing what well-being is and how important it is to have that factored into our educational leadership preparation programs. And for any of you that aren't aware of this, the PEASL standards, Adam, your goals that you have for your school system align perfectly with the PEASL standards. And one of the things that's in the PEASLs, every single STEM of the, I think it's 8 standards, maybe 10, is well-being. They use the word well-being in every standard in PEASLs. Okay, so that's our kind of our strands of our current research that we're doing at Auburn. And if I could get you to skip now, go one more. Yeah. So this is, I was fortunate enough to be one of 4 people, experts from Alabama, 2 from the University of Alabama, me from Auburn, and then a former colleague of mine that was at Auburn that now is at the University of Florida. We were fortunate enough to receive a contract with the state of Alabama to create and implement a new principal mentoring program in Alabama. And when we sat down at the very first meeting retreat that we had about what is this program going to look like, the charge that we had been given by the State Department was, we want something that is innovative and that will last for a while. So you can see at the very center of this model is mentoring for personal and professional development. So we use quite a bit of the PERMA model. We train our mentors to understand what the PERMA model is and how to go about working with their mentees, these new principals. And the outcome is to increase the effectiveness of the school leaders, get them to stay in their roles and be resilient, and improve school climate and academic outcomes. So that's the kind of the model that we created. And so I'm happy to say, I think Alabama is finally leading the way in something on the Eastern Coast in this. So it's been quite a fun 2 years with this project. And I think that was my last slide.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ellen. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Karen. Well, thanks for the opportunity to learn from this panel. What a dynamic learning event. I know we're getting close to kind of our end time, so I'll probably go a little bit quicker through slides.
Thank you.
And so we can, I think from your wonderful introduction, Karen, we can move to the next slide. And just to sort of set up this idea of a positive organizational perspective. So as Karen mentioned, this idea of well-being, and in her case from flow at school and work, the two places where we spend the most of our life. I have been researching well-being in a work context and using what has been called a positive organizational perspective. And I think, Karen, you provided a beautiful overview of the PERMA model. So just to let you know that that was the conceptual model that I used with a colleague to look at well-being in schools and to try to understand, how do teachers experience well-being at work? What are the ways that we can pay attention to that positive end of the continuum of well-being called flourishing, that ideal state of well-being, where you have at the other end of the continuum this notion of languishing. And we heard that word come up a lot during pandemic and now sort of post-pandemic times. And so maybe next slide. I'll just kind of hang out in this slide for a moment. So part of what we were really curious to learn about was, again, tapping into what Karen had mentioned, this idea that Marty Seligman and Csikszentmihalyi brought to the forefront in the psychology world, was this idea of what happens when we pay attention to what works well, to strengths, to assets. What happens when we pay attention to these things, not only in well-being, but we were looking at school, what happens in learning, what happens with creativity. So what we were trying to do was to put together a research project that would let us pay attention to well-being from teachers' perspectives and have them tell us stories of what already works well. We weren't denying the challenges, the trauma, the struggles, the stressors. Those are always a part of what it means to work with humans in this human development endeavor that we are all in. So if we recognize that opportunity to also look within that, what are some of those bright spots? What happens when we pay attention to those? So this was our research question, and we went out in qualitative case research in Western Canada and asking teachers and school leaders, what if your primary role is to learn how to flourish? What happens when you pay attention to that question? And if we go to the next slide, I'll just share very briefly some of the findings. So as we talked with teachers and school leaders, we found that in flourishing schools, there were many things that came to light that we already know about schooling. And we heard from both Pamela and Adam what happens when you pay attention to how to really positively engage students with support, with care, with encouragement. From Karen, we heard about that idea of flow, having that right amount of challenge. And then as we heard from Ellen around this idea of what happens when we really mentor and support our teachers. Well, these teachers in our study were telling us all of these different pieces, and that flourishing is reciprocal. We flourish when our students do. And for principals, that's really important, because principals will often say, we flourish when our students do and when our teachers do. So how can we pay attention to the stories that teachers are telling us around what makes them feel well? Relationships, laughter, feeling cared for, feeling known, feeling that they matter, that their contributions are making a difference. And we heard from Pamela as she shared about how she tries to find that bright spot every day and encourage. And then the ways that Katie was talking about and the graduate community of how they try to pay attention to what works well, and it makes a difference. So I just, I guess maybe point to the book in the bottom corner, Teacher Wellbeing, Noticing, Nurturing, and Sustaining Flourishing. The book contains all of the theory, the conceptual frameworks that we used, and tried to then bring in all of the activities and approaches that teachers and school leaders shared with us, the positive practices that help them pay attention to their flourishing. And this has really proven to be a useful resource for teachers and leaders who want to come together in community and build a flourishing learning experience. So maybe to the next slide, we'll see. I don't even know what's coming. Let's see. Why don't I leave it with this? This is one tool, I'll say a tool that I created from the findings. You can see those keywords of purpose, passion, and play. It's built on an appreciative inquiry model. It's also paying attention to the inquiry models of learning that we know are so powerful in schools, and really using that idea of language, questions. It matters. And the ways that we ask the question leads us into the inquiry in a different way and sustains our inquiry, sharing stories that help us to dig into some of those challenges and stressors and find new avenues and opportunities for renewal, for repair, for healing. I have gone through about 8 years of study in less than 4 minutes. I know that was very quick, but I know that we want to hear from Sabrina. And so maybe I can just end there
And I've teed
and turn it
Sabrina up.
over.
I've teed Sabrina up. She said she can be done in 5. So we'll be on time at 6:30. I'm afraid we're not gonna have time for questions though. Sabrina?
I'll do what I can. So I just want to say I appreciate what everybody has talked about so far, and especially what I hear a lot of is this real desire to try and help students be well. And as Dr. Reams talked about, really this in some ways we start talking about bringing this back, thinking about the teachers as well. Dr. Czerkowski also mentioned this. But I'm going to maybe say something controversial, which is I actually think that this actually begins with the leaders and the leaders' well-being in a really strong way. So this is just a quick shout out to my colleague Julia Mafous and her colleagues who have put together this pro-social school leader model. And really we can think about this not just as school leaders, but as educational leaders in general, thinking about how what we need to do to be well. So if you don't mind changing the slide, Monica. So this model, this actually comes from some work by John Gritch and Sharon Hamby, looking at more discrete stressors, but really as we think about the work of educational leaders, there's a lot of things that come up around chronic exposure to stressors. So not just discrete stressors, but more chronic exposure, and thinking about what it is that we need to do to enhance our own well-being. Again, well-being being that PERMA model that's already been discussed. And you'll see on the slide some of the things that we carry with us into each stressful interaction are these resources, like the things that we're talking about already, conducive environments, that support, that mentoring, things along those lines, but also our personal assets. What are we bringing into the equation? And mindfulness is one part of that. Also our ability to emotionally regulate, our interpersonal skills that we have with others. I think our panelists already have talked a bit about just what they bring to the equation, which I think is vitally important and maybe underappreciated at times. But beyond those assets, we also have the way that we react to stressors and what we do to prepare for them, our coping and self-care. If I can get the next slide, please. So I've actually tested this model with some data with educational leaders, and I won't go into all of that, but just to say, looking at how these assets and coping skills and self-care both directly impacted well-being for leaders, but also how it moderated that relationship between stress and well-being outcomes. So again, in this work, we can talk about well-being in a couple of different ways. One way we can talk about well-being and this idea of PERMA is this process, right? This idea of engaging with supportive relationships, this idea of kind of fostering positive emotions, especially as Dr. Czerkowski talked about, like with our teachers, with our students. We can engage in this as a process, but we can also think about well-being as an outcome, something that we have, such as our health, and especially for educational leaders who are in a lot of cases in midlife, that health piece can be vitally important, especially important. Can we get the next slide, please? So just really quickly, in terms of results, what I want to highlight definitely is this idea that mindful awareness actually moderates the relationship between stress and psychological distress, such that when people are more mindful, no matter how much stress they're kind of reporting, they're not reporting increases in psychological distress. Whereas people who are lower in that mindful awareness actually are reporting increased psychological distress when there's an increased level of stress. There's also direct relationships of mindful awareness to burnout symptoms, showing less burnout symptoms. Same with emotion regulation and its relationship with psychological distress. There are other things around coping and self-care, such that physical exercise was related to a whole host of positive things, including less physical health issues, feelings of depersonalization, and emotional exhaustion. Unfortunately, our experienced leaders were less likely to be using this as a coping mechanism. And a surprising finding was that seeking social support was actually related to more difficulties with physical health, feelings of depersonalization, and emotional exhaustion. And one thing might be because this is a relationship, so it could be the opposite is true, that physical health issues are related to more social support seeking. But it can also be because we might have some, rather than the kind of positive support that Dr. Reams was talking about with mentorship, this could fall into workplace co-rumination, where we're not necessarily getting support, we're just kind of complaining with one another, which can actually have more harmful effects. And unfortunately, we do see that women are more likely to use social support coping than men. Can I get the next slide? So just to say a little bit about some future directions. So one of the things that I do work on, I'm actually a master trainer for a program called Cultivating Awareness and Resilience in Education. This is a mindfulness-based professional development program that we've used extensively with teachers. I'll show you that in just a minute. But also more recently, we've been bringing this into leadership, with the idea that we don't just want teachers to know how to do this, we want our leaders to know how to do this, because you all are the people the leaders are the people who really set the tone in the school, help to set the tone, and also help to really lead by example with these kinds of things. And really thinking that because care focuses on mindful stress management strategies, emotion awareness and regulation, and then caring and compassion skills and practices, we really hope to see a lot of changes. And we have seen a lot of changes. If I can get the last slide. So just to say, and I'm not going to read this all out to you, but we do see a lot of positive increases for, and again, this was for teachers and educational leaders, both personally with mindfulness and emotion regulation, some things decreasing, such as psychological and physical distress. But we also see changes, and again, this program is specifically for the individual, but we see downstream improvement in terms of classroom organization and emotional support. We see improvements for students who have the more behavior problems, and then also leaders report more positive relationships with others. So there are actually these intervention programs, again, like Dr. Reams had talked about, but other intervention programs as well that can help improve some of these situations. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And to all of those of you who brought forward your practices and your research, we just want to thank you tremendously for your time and for the willingness to always share. I especially, Adam and Pamela have never told me no. And I just thank you both so very much, as well as the researchers who are bringing to the UCEA community from Canada, from California, from Alabama, from Penn, and from Ohio State. So I just am excited to be here and to host you in this effort, and just look forward to seeing as many of you as I can in Puerto Rico in November, right?
Yeah, I just want to add my thanks to the panel. It was really compelling, and I felt a lot of resonance across all of what you're doing and what you're finding in your research. So thank you to all, and I can see implications for leadership prep. So we're going to continue this conversation, somehow in some space. But for now, thank you so very, very much. It was a wonderful, 90 minutes that flew by, and that was next time we'll have to, count more time in this, because I have questions, and I know there are some questions that we'll share with you post this panel. But again, thank you so very much to our panelists. Thank you to everyone who attended today. We've recorded this. We will put this on our YouTube channel, our UCA YouTube channel. So we'll all have an opportunity to go back and slow it down and take some notes. So thank you all very much again. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Monica, and thank you all.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good
Wonderful.
night.
Thank you for inviting us.